Okay. All right. Dr. Porter, welcome to the Healing Beyond Recovery podcast. I'm so excited you're here. And I want to take a moment to just say thank you for all the contributions that you've brought to the world through your own experience, through the experience of your dad that we'll get into. So thanks for being here and thank you so much.
Well, it's great to be here, and I'm glad to share it with people to let them know what helped me and what helped with our families, so they might get help as well.
Yeah, beautiful. And that's really what it's all about. If we can share a message of hope and know that people have the ability to heal and transform their own lives in their own brain and nervous system, then that's so important. So I want to start off by saying, you mention a quote frequently when you talk. You say, you were blessed to be the son of an alcoholic. Now, I'm the son of an alcoholic, and it hasn't been peaches and cream for me. And I know a lot of people in the recovery community have alcoholic parents. So how was having an alcoholic father fortunate for you, and how did it lead you to who you've become in the work that you're doing today in the world?
Well, I firmly believe we're all on a mission to find our superpower, and life provides us with whatever it is that we need to go through on our journey. And for me, it was being born into an alcoholic family and watching the dysfunction that happened. And then luckily for me, my dad got help. So I got an example of, hey, you can get out of this if you do this practice, which in our case was meditation. Get your brain balanced, keep yourself focused, do what you need to do. And so the blessing came because my dad got help. If he didn't get help, I'd be the one having to do that. And I usually tell people that I know for sure he's helped millions of people, because around the world, we're helping millions of people with my technology over the years. So, and that was all because he was willing to go to a seminar and, relax and learn. So to me, also, you need to look at your past. If my past is a liability, then my self-esteem, my self-worth will all be a liability as well. My whole self-esteem, self-worth, self-confidence all comes from my past. So if I discount my past, then I've given up on a great resource. Now, sometimes we do everything wrong, but at least if we look at it and say, wow, I found, kind of like Edison and the light bulb, I found 999 ways the light bulb just doesn't work. Sometimes that's our life. We find 999 ways that our life just doesn't work. We need to kind of tick it off and say, okay, I did that. We know that alcohol isn't an answer, but some people will keep going back to that well, or could be drugs, whatever it is. If you're not getting the outcome you want in your life, then we need to change that. And that's where the neuroplasticity comes in. And really, even what they say in the big book, you have to have a psychic change, which means a change of the mind. If you don't have that change of the mind, you're going to always have that. It's always like you're in the book. Also, I have a chapter called The Dragons of the Past. And what I mean by that is people drag on their past. They keep dragging it on and on and on. And we want to cut that past loose. We want to learn from the past. Yeah. It would be very easy for me to be an alcoholic. My dad showed me the exact way to do it. So if I did the same things he did, then I would have a pretty good chance of being an alcoholic. Now, also, there's some physiological things too. So I'm not saying it's all mental, but if you get the mental and you're doing the things physically, you've kind of stacked it all in your favor. That's the main thing.
Yeah, and we know you can have some genes that predispose you to addiction, but ultimately it's an environment that turns them on. So it sounds like your dad did a real righteous thing by showing you what he learned, and therefore it's actually through your dad's suffering has birthed your purpose that's helped so many people. So I think that's just a fantastic story and a true testament to finding your superpower. Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah. And I'm a true believer that addiction, alcoholism, all addiction from substance abuse comes from trauma, from a dysregulation in the nervous system. And we're reaching outside of ourselves, trying to, fill our internal longing or whatever it is we're looking for. When in fact, when it comes to healing addiction and or trauma and healing and recovery, I've found that addressing the neurobiology, the brain and nervous system, is essential to healing. So you mentioned a lot, we need to turn off the surviving brain and turn on the thriving brain. That's exactly what we need to do. So tell us a little bit about that, if you don't mind.
Right. Well, we're actually conditioned for the negative, right? I grew up at a Catholic school, so I was told everything not to do. And we know now in psychology that the absolute wrong way to train somebody, because obviously I went and did everything they told me not to do. So when you focus on the negative, and also if you're in fear, like if I get up every morning and think, oh no, is today the day that I'm going to be addicted? Today's the day something bad's going to happen. If I have a negative outlook, then that keeps what we call our beta brain, or our reactionary brain, that really is that fight or flight, and that's the survivor brain, and we're conditioned for that. We need that. So that part of our brain isn't wrong or broken. We just don't need it on all the time. You know, it's like used to be, they say that when these bodies were designed for the Serengeti, right? I mean, we should be out there. We might have a stressful event 4 or 5 times a week. Well, now people have more than that for breakfast. You know, they're sitting watching television or doing their phones. We need to turn all that stuff off, and we need to regulate our brain, because when you're in that thriving brain, really what we're saying is our brain is communicating between the right and left hemisphere. On an even deeper note, we have different functions of the brain, left brain, right brain, they call it, but it's really logical function and creative function. And usually the two cannot communicate at the same time. You're either in one or the other. Mm-hmm. And so what we tell people, when you're in the thriving brain, you get a glimpse into, hey, problem solution. There's a problem, think of the solution. If you have a solution, you evaluate what might be the problems, but you focus on the solution. And I think that's what, and so when you do that, you open up your nervous system. And some people might call it flow, or different states like that. When you're in that state, when you're in the thriving brain, you have a lot of energy, and we live in an energy economy. So most people know that they should never do things when they're stressed, tired, overwhelmed, or if they're, in pain, the old stop model. And the reason for that is we live in an energy economy, which means when our energy is low, that's when we're most susceptible to make bad decisions. So like alcohol, using that as an example, you get the sugar blues. Now you're down in the dumps again. You believe, if you're still in the alcoholic mindset, that, hey, I just need a drink. It'll bring me back. I can self-medicate. But we find out you can't chase that. It never works, because the biological system goes out of control. So we're electrical beings. And what I like to tell people, and even on a higher level, science has now shown that we're actually light beings. That used to be considered a metaphysical concept. But the reality is that science is showing that we communicate within our bodies through something called biophotons. Every cell of our body, when you're talking about genetics, we now know that only 20% of your genetic expression comes from your parents. The rest comes from the books you read, the food you consume, the beverages you drink. Your environment has a lot to do with it, right? So if we want to turn on those cells through photobiomodulation, which is what our brain does, to be alcohol-free, we need to think, act, and respond to life in that way. So that's where the meditation comes in. So you have to train the brain to live in the thriving brain. If not, it's going to go to default. Our default mode is protection. Who's out to get me? What's going on? Because these even though we don't remember our great grandparents, their genetic makeup's inside of us. In fact, they say that when you make a change, you've made a change for 7 generations. When you were born, you actually brought with you your ancestors into this life experience. And it's not metaphysical anymore. Science is proving this to be true. So if we can get in the thriving brain, we're giving our body at the very basic genetic level the capacity to express, as I would like to say, alcohol-free. There's not really a better term for that. I mean, people aren't born either alcoholic or not, or addicted or not. They make those decisions as they live and grow. Now, some bodies, like your physical body might be more dependent if you, for instance, put a drink in. Most people don't know that what's happening, it's actually an immunity problem, because when you drink a drink, your immune system goes into high alert, and white marker cells are employed throughout the body. And so the overproduction of white marker cells causes us to form an addiction, because white marker cells, kind of think of them like Navy SEALs. And I love the Navy SEAls. When we have a battleship named after us, USS Porter. My grandfather started the Marine Corps with Abraham Lincoln. But,
oh, wow.
but if you put those Navy SEALs in a room and you give them a common goal, someone to fight, that's great. You got a unified force. These guys and gals are just powerful. But if you put them in a bar without not enough women, let's say, or men, so they can date, and they start having a few drinks, that's going to escalate just like in the movies where they'll start fighting each other. Well, that's what white marker cells do. So the best way is to calm your nervous system, like you're saying, do a meditation. That puts there's something called psychoimmunology. Your psychology affects your immunity. So when you keep your immune system at check, where it's basically monitoring your environment and just producing enough white marker cells, you'll never have that addictive, if it's a physical addiction. Now, not everybody can claim that, but there's a strong population that does. And then, but if we have our thoughts thinking like, in our electrical system, which is our nervous system has infinite energy. As a great example, most people, when they get really tired, they'll go, I need some food, I'm tired. They'll eat something and they get energy. Well, that's not even physiologically possible. But psychologically, because they ate something, they got a boost of energy. The energy takes anywhere between 2 to 3 hours to convert from stomach to energy in the body. But we can breathe. Think of all negative emotions. When people aren't, when they're stuck in these negative states, if they learn to breathe through them, now we get energy. Not only oxygen is what we're breathing, but there's actually energy in the air that we're bringing that transforms into ATP, which then regulates the body accordingly. So the thriving brain is when all this physical, mental, emotional, and even spiritual all kind of align so that we're showing up as our best selves and making all of our best decisions. And you don't have to think any farther than one day. To get across the country driving, all you have to do is drive safely one day at a time, you get across the country. So you don't have to do it. You don't have to just think about the end result all the time. You can think about it, but think about what you're doing daily.
Yeah, of course. And to access that logic brain and that creative brain, we have to move out of that fight or flight, which when people come to see me, they're stuck, as we would call it in somatic experience and Dr. Peter Levine's work, their nervous system is stuck on. And we have to begin to find maybe the ventral vagal place or that the hierarchy of our nervous system, that prefrontal cortex, so we can connect and get out of that surviving brain. So I think that's really crucial. And one thing that you mentioned is meditation. Now, for me, in my own personal story, Dr. Porter, I had a profound mystical experience after being sick. Now, when you talk about the psychology and immunity are linked, I developed autoimmune disease, ulcerative colitis, about 5 years in my recovery. And the inflammation, because we know the gut and the brain are so intricately connected, the inflammation went from my gut to my brain. I developed multiple chemical sensitivity. My amygdalas were stuck on. I was reacting to the outside environment. My immune system went haywire. And now I'm also the son of a preacher. And in that evangelical Christianity, like meditation, it wasn't really the right thing to do, let's just say. But I listened to my inner wisdom and I began to practice meditation. Now, when I say meditation, Dr. Porter, I don't mean like I took 5-10 minutes out a day. I was suffering so deeply. I left my corporate job. I had to. I was so sick. And I began to find myself in the woods so I could not be so stimulated by the outside environment. And I was meditating hours a day because, on the contrary, I was contemplating suicide. And through meditation, I had this profound shift in consciousnse that led to the rearranging of my gene expression, and I developed healing, and I had a psychic, change, and it was a powerful, powerful thing. So I know you're a meditation teacher. I'm a meditation teacher. Tell me why meditation is so important when it comes to healing our brain and nervous system, and even maybe transforming.
Mm-hmm. Well, first, let's talk about how it worked for you in an accelerated way, because you did something that they call in Japan forest bathing, which we now know that when you go into the woods and you meditate and you ground yourself, you're actually getting energy from everything in the universe is entrained to something else. So you're vibrating at a frequency, those trees are vibrating at a frequency, the earth is vibrating at a frequency. And when you tune into that, you start to be symbiotic. You start to learn and express through that process.
I was hugging the trees, pleading for their strength from their roots. So I totally get it.
Yes. And you'll get it because everything is connected. It's all beads on a string. There's no disconnection. The problem that we have in our world today is that there's this disconnection. People start looking at things and people and events and separating them. The reality is that nobody gets out of here alive. We all have to work together to build this up. And we've been given the tools. It's just people don't. So let's take a look at how do gurus do it. When you think of a guru meditating, we always have an image of them on the mountain, right? They're meditating in a cave. Well, most people don't know that what they did was they set themselves up for success, just like you did going into the woods. Because when you're in the mountains, that mountain is resonating at 7.8 hertz frequency. That happens to be theta. That also taps you into a part of the mind, which I call the inventive mind. You get to reinvent yourself there. It's where you hung out when you were 0 to 7 years old most of the day. You didn't know who you were. You were absorbing the world. You were taking it all in. Then you had to sort it all out. And depending upon how mother, father, preachers, and teachers talk to you, in your case, they were the same thing. So you have, that goes into all of your modifiers. Because the reality is that in this world, the average person only responds to 40 pieces of information when they hear it, but we actually are listening at all times. Our ears are actually listening and responding to 25,000 or more pieces of information every second of every minute, every day. You've probably been to a restaurant before and sitting there talking, and maybe it was 3 tables over, somebody says something about recovery, let's say. So your ears pop up and all you heard was recovery. You didn't hear anything else because your reticular activator marked that out. So that's meaningful for me. And that's how we decide now through our filters, our brain's filters. We either can accept information, like a lot of people say, I'm giving you all the information you need. You should be able to make a decision. Well, if it's not in their filter, they just delete it. It doesn't see it. Now, our eyes, on the other hand, we actually see, they say we process 1,000 or more pieces of information every second, but we only act on, again, less than 50. So that means we're rendering our reality. We're basically forecasting and imagining it. So why is meditation important? If we're doing all of this in a flow state, in real time, why wouldn't we practice it? There's not a professional athlete on earth that doesn't practice before they go into the game. But people don't realize this is a game of life, and they never practice for it. So then they get there and they get beat up because they never anticipated. Deepak Chopra, back when I took training with him in '89, before he became as big as he is now, he came to Louisville, Kentucky, and I took a training with him. And he said one thing during that seminar that I've been repeating over and over again since then. He said, 97% of what's going to happen to you tomorrow, you know about today. So what are you pretending not to know? So what is the addicted person? The person with addiction thinking, they believe a few things that aren't true because they keep spiraling out into this. But if they were truthful and honest with themselves, that's why you got to take that moral inventory, right? And figure out where you're at. It doesn't have to be done in a group. You just have to realize, what are your strengths? What aren't your strengths? Whatever isn't your strength. And most people thinking, unfortunately, isn't their strength because they've been told their whole life what to think instead of how to think. So meditation gives you a time. Meditation doesn't have to be mindlessness. You know, like a lot of people think, oh, I'm going to just empty my mind. I'm going to become a Zen Buddhist. No, we're not talking about that. We're talking about just giving yourself time to settle the nervous system. There's an innate intelligence at work here that's bigger than all of us, you know. And I think one of the main steps in addiction therapy is people to realize that you are not the end of it all. You know, there's something bigger than you. There's something greater than you. There's something that is conspiring with you for your success if you tune into it. But in the same way you can tune into that success frequency, you can turn into the failure frequency.
Yeah, be still and know that I am God.
Yes.
Right? That's what Jesus said. Like we can connect to that higher consciousness and that part of us that can observe what's here. Like, for example, we are the blue sky, everything else is the clouds. So that's so important. And you're talking a lot about brainwave states, which I want to just tune in for a moment. And I specifically want to talk about what you've created, which is this device, BrainTap device, which uses meditation, self-talk, music, frequency, light to help balance the brain. And so you can function optimally. Now, can you tell us a little bit about those specific brain wave states and why they're important?
Sure. And when you're thinking about it, when people ask, why did I create it? Think of ancient technologies. I mean, ancient traditions, and we're making modern technology out of them. So this isn't something, these technologies have been used since the dawn of mankind. So it's not like there's something called helos therapy even written about in the Vedas, which talks about going out in the
Light.
morning and under the morning sun and healing your brain because of infrared light that comes in the morning. It comes between 3:30 and 6 in the morning. So what we did is we did a lot of research. What can we research to make it work? So in order to get somebody out of this beta brain, which hopefully they're in beta, but you're never in one brainwave only. If you're only in one brainwave, then you're going to have a disorder.
Okay.
If you have too much beta, for instance, you're going to have attention deficit with maybe hyperactivity. Or if it's way too much, you might have anxiety disorders, stress, confusion. And now the brain gets stuck there. Like you said, we call it neurological lock. And you're talking about the same thing. So they don't know how to shift gears. So beta, we should only be about 45% in beta when we're awake. When we're asleep, beta should be about 3 to 4%. It's still there monitoring, making sure we're safe while we sleep, but it shouldn't be present. Now, if we drop down a little bit into what most people would meditate into, is called alpha, there's a band of brain waves right between there called SMR that have to do with sensory motor rhythm. And what we find is that's the brain wave between beta and alpha. They're kind of combined in most charts, but that brain wave is the one that gets damaged by drinking too much. That's why you lose your balance. It has to do with your vestibular system.
Wow.
So a lot of times, a lot of our trainings, our morning sessions are actually, we call it digital coffee because it wakes up that brainwave and gives you energy. So alpha is a high energy state. It's also an intuitive state. It's a creative state. It's if Einstein probably said it best when he said, if you're on a hot stove for a minute, it seems like an hour. If you're sitting with a beautiful woman for an hour, it seems like a minute. You know, it's all relevant to what you're doing. So that in that level of the mind, there is no time. We can be creative, we can do whatever. Now, what happens if you have too much alpha, not enough beta, you become attention deficit, right? You become one of these people in fact, people that meditate without practical use of that meditation, that's where the old saying used to be, they're so heavenly proud, they're no earthly good, because they get spacey. You know, that's what happens to like creative people that don't know how to balance their checkbooks, and they get taken by lawyers and things like that, because they're not worried about this world. They're in this creative zone. So you have to have the balance there. So 30% alpha while we're walking around everyday life, that's a perfect mixture. We say a symphony of brainwaves. So theta, when we're meditating, we want to increase alpha and theta. In lower beta. So theta is a brainwave state, very small band between 4 and 7 hertz frequency. And theta is a threshold. It's a brainwave that puts you into sleep. So most adults are missing theta. That's why they don't sleep. 2/3 of America isn't sleeping. So one of the things I know for addiction is if we can get them back sleeping through the night, they will make better decisions, because sleep is the gateway to our superpower. If we don't have enough sleep, even if you don't sleep well for 3 nights in a row, it's equivalent to drinking a 6-pack and trying to drive. That's how bad it is. So we need to have that sleep. But if you don't have, so let's say you don't have enough alpha, you'll demonstrate the same functions of somebody who has autism, because the autistic brain doesn't have alpha. So all these brain waves are important. Now, delta is the one associated with sleep. So we need to turn off all those other brain waves as much as possible, get as deep into sleep as possible. But during sleep, we cycle through alpha, theta, delta. We spend most of our time in delta, hopefully, at least an hour to 2 in deep states of delta, and maybe 2 to 3 hours in REM. And we're going to wake up totally energized, because we get our energy by moving through these brainwave states. That's why somebody who practices meditation, they usually don't have to sleep as much, because they're getting their energy. They're also those levels of sleep, you're building up your neurotransmitter bank account. So think in terms of when we're thinking, every thought has a corresponding chemical reaction to it. And we have 54 different neurotransmitters. So these literally transmit the emotional component through chemicals to our brain that make those decisions. If we don't have them, then the brain has to use what's there. And it's just like if we had skilled workers or we had interns, we want to use the skilled workers. We don't want to use the interns. So the brain will use whatever's available, but it would much rather use the right neurotransmitters. Now, when all of these 5 below the surface kind of work, then there's another brainwave that now we're finding more about. 10 years ago, it started to hit the realms. It's called gamma. And what we know with meditation is while you're down here meditating in alpha and theta, we see a corresponding gamma burst, which means this brain starts operating at a higher level. And we've done some scans with high level athletes, like professional and Olympic athletes. They seem to have more gamma than anyone else. People who meditate tend to have more gamma than anyone else. Creative people, just out of the box, if you know somebody that's like super creative, you just give them a project and they creatively, they probably have a great degree of gamma. My brother-in-law, who's a surgeon in Scottsdale, I had him imagine that he was doing one of his surgeries and we did a live scan on his brain, and he had so much gamma, I couldn't believe it. But he's doing really intricate surgery. And he says time just flies. He doesn't even feel like it's there, but he could be in surgery for 4 to 6 hours, but he's in that higher state of consciousness. So these brainwaves all play in, and you can actually do physical things to train those brains, the brain, like physical exercise, or you can do like BrainTap or meditation, yoga, Tai Chi, dancing, for instance. Those 3 things, I always recommend if somebody comes to me for addiction therapy, while we're going through it, they have to either go to yoga, Tai Chi, or dancing, because it's going to move their nervous system. We need to teach, our bodies are designed to move and breathe. So even though meditation, we're sitting still, we're meditating, that's just to prepare yourself. A lot of people don't realize that yoga was developed over the centuries for meditation.
Yep.
Yoga was only to prepare the brain for meditation. Now we think people do yoga, but then they never do the meditation. It's like revving up your engine, filling it with gas, and then parking it in the garage. You've got all this energy that can do some work for you, but you're not using it.
Totally. I had a meditation teacher for, she was an avid Ashtangi, and she practiced for like 15 years, but she still couldn't get herself to sit down on the cushion. And I thought that was very interesting. So you actually answered one of my questions, which was, what can people do to optimally train these brainwave states if they don't have a BrainTap? And what you're referring to is you can meditate, you can do yoga, Tai Chi, maybe some Qigong. There are other ways to do this if you don't have the means to necessarily purchase a device. But if you do, I'm finding wonderful results with going to sleep and relaxing. And even, we're going to get into this in a sec, but the self-talk and the having more confidence and working with that other than conscious mind that you talk about. But before we go there, let me bring it back here a little bit to sleep. And I know people who suffer from addiction and who are in recovery, even for a long time, have trouble sleeping. And one thing you talked about in your talks is the importance of GABA and producing enough GABA. Now, when I had my cognitive issues, I didn't know what was going on with me, but I would sit back in my couch. I would feel so tense. I would feel like I was holding my cell phone so hard, gripping it. And then I would go to bed and I would have these same repetition thoughts over and over and over again. And my functional medicine doc was like, hey, Mike, and she looked at my charts. I had some issue with the glutamate system. She's like, you don't make enough GABA. And I was like, what is GABA? So she introduced me to taking precursors, such as a product through Apex Energetics, which has valerian root, passion flower, B6, theanine, all these different precursors to support GABA production. And since then, Dr. Porter, GABA has been part of my routine. So can you talk about the importance of GABA in sleep just for a bit?
Right. So think of all these neurotransmitters as binders that if they're not available, the brain can't move through those states. But if you're in theta, like if you have your natural sleep cycle, which you should go through 6 or 7 times at night, just cycling through it, each time you're there, the brain actually tells the gut what to do. And by the way, we found if you have a leaky gut, you have a leaky brain. So we have a brain biome as well as a gut biome, and they're mirrored. So whatever is happening in one, it's happening in the other. So what we do with GABA is really important because think of it like the soothing bath before you go to sleep. If you need a warm bath, it prepares the brain. It's very hard to jump from this beta brain to the delta brain, to deep sleep. So we have these neurotransmitters that guide the brain through these slows down the frequency of the brain. And GABA is also going to help us with dreaming. if you don't have enough GABA, you don't dream. So a lot of people go, wow, my dreams are so vivid now, what's going on? Well, you have more GABA available, so you're remembering them. They're still happening before, but
Wow.
GABA, they now say GABA triggers a little bit of the natural DMT receptors in our brain. So for those that have researched plant-based medicine, you know that DMT is one of the things that people want to, trigger if they're doing these psychedelics, but it's natural. It washes out of the system very fast, but these are natural to the body. So what I recommend before sleep to produce more GABA for those that are not doing it is do the breathing. There's 2 different breathing exercises. The easiest is to breathe into the mental count of 4 and then breathe out to the mental count of 8 and continue doing that as you scan your body. This body scan, which is a yogic technique to offload every cell of your body. When you're talking about the somatics of the body, your body is like a hard drive. And like people like Louise Hay wrote the book, You Can Heal Your Life. Each part of your body has a psychosomatic connection. For instance, if we talk about the knees, I can guarantee you if somebody's having trouble with their knees, they have problems with change. If it's their left knee, they have problems with their past change. If they have problems with their right knee, it's a problem with future change. And it's weird, but everything is connected, and when you start doing this in our therapy rooms, everyone always had a book, one of Louise Hay's, so they could look up what's going on. Oh, I got right shoulder problems, left, or their left hand hurts. Oh, they're not willing to receive. We got to teach them more the ability to do that. Oh, they're not able to give. We're going to have to teach them some gratitude and some forgiveness. There's always an emotional correspondent. And if the brain's not right, if your brain's not firing on all cylinders or doing it, that's why meditation is the corner. I actually, even in the biohacking world, which we're really big into now, not because I wanted to, but because they found us. And, we call it health optimization, I think is a better word for it. But what they're finding is that you can do all these other physiological things, but if you're not in that thriving brain, you're not going to absorb and utilize those nutrients. We actually did a study with a group in Provo, Utah, where they showed they got 30% more absorption in one of their brain studies for addiction. They have an addiction therapy where they do intravenous work, where they're feeding the brain the amino acids that it needs. It's called Fusion Health, and they did a special on them on NBC, but it looked like it was a special on BrainTap because they're saying they showed everybody with the BrainTap doing this intravenous feeding. But what we found was if they were watching their phone, they're stressed out. Their body's not absorbing as much nutrients. So like what you did when you kind of did that when you went out to the woods. You got away from all the stimulus, everything that was driving your brain crazy, got back to nature. That outside in nature is a 10 hertz frequency. So if you're in the woods, in the forest, you're actually bathing your body and you're building up those neurotransmitters. By the way, 10 hertz frequency, 7.8 hertz frequency, we see gamma burst and delta burst. So both into the spectrum, it's like the brain opens up. So when you're meditating, even though you might be in a theta state, your brain is regulating all the brain waves. Those seem to be like natural idle points for your brain to idle and make its improvements.
Wow, it's so fascinating. And you bring up a great point, the connection between the gut and the brain. And you mentioned during proper sleep, your brain instructs your gut to make all the neurotransmitters. And you're right on. When your gut's inflamed, your brain's inflamed. And for everyone, if you're eating a standard American diet and processed foods and high inflammation, you're not going to be making the correct amount of neurotransmitters. And if you have leaky gut, like Dr. Porter said, you'll probably have leaky brain. That's what happened to me. I had irritable bowel disease. My whole colon was ulcerated, and I had a broken blood-brain barrier. And it was very, very painful. And so one huge component to my own healing journey, which I recommend to my clients I work with, is let's get your gut on board. Let's get your sleep on board so you can actually make the nutrients that you need to feel good, right? 90% of your neurotransmitters made in your gut, 50% of dopamine made in your gut. Like you said, everything is connected. So it's so important. There's so many trailheads I could go off right now. I'm glad you mentioned plant medicine and psychedelic. I know we're talking about recovery, but one huge area of discovery that's on the forefront right now is psychedelic therapy, MDMA, ayahuasca, psilocybin. So I don't have any problems going there. Thank you for mentioning it. Do you have any experience with seeing people heal from plant medicine, specifically their brain? I'm just curious.
Yeah, I've assisted with a research project that's ongoing right now in Texas, in Dallas, Texas. Our doctor's doing a psilocybin study with PTSD, and we had some people that, you know, they were addicts, so didn't want to do the drug. So what we did is we mirrored a session of somebody having their psilocybin trip, and then I did a BrainTap session that mirrored that, and people were having the same kind of experiences with just the light, sound, and vibration. And that's really why like in Brazil, we're now being reviewed right now as a digital drug, because we're able to up level those 54 different neurotransmitters just by using light, sound, and vibration and moving them through a certain algorithm. And so I've never done a psilocybin myself. I've done some microdosing just to see for concentration and focus. I did a little preliminary study with them, and I found that it did, and didn't have any effect like making me high or anything, which was good. I wasn't looking for that, but it was like your focus, your concentration is all there. So I think we're on the threshold, and as more states open up the medical use of it, I think that under the right guidance, I think it's great. You know, they always say set and setting in that situation. So you're not just taking it to party, but you're doing it for a specific reason. And I think anything that unlocks the nervous system with the capacity to reorganize afterwards, which they're finding that plant medicine's doing, it's actually has a lot of neuroplastic change in the brain. And for those that aren't familiar with neuroplastic change, just think of it like brain speed. The faster we can make somebody's brain operate, the better off. The presupposition is that they're going to think better because they have more choices available and they'll have more energy. So the less mitochondrial activity in the brain, that means inflammation. And inflammation is really the downfall of brain function. And it starts really, one of the primary things people can do to stop that is stop eating so much sugar. That's the main. I mean, we eat so much sugar in this country than we used to, and that's a big downer for the brain.
For sure. And on my own journey, I had to take therapeutic doses of essential fatty acids, fish oils, turmeric, resveratrol, polyphenols, to really help dampen that inflammation and turn on these different genetic expressions to heal. So microdosing, I'm glad you mentioned that. If you go to my last episode with Adam Bramalaj, the CEO and founder of Flow State Micro, interview him on the power of microdosing.
I enjoyed that one. I listened to that one. It was very good. I thought it was very well done.
Oh, nice. Thank you. Thank you for listening to that. And as we wind down here, I want to talk a little bit about self-talk. And I know this device, I'm curious, I have a question for you, is you're giving me messages when I listen to this, and are you hypnotizing me?
Well, if you listen to the questions, they're usually questions for you, like, how will you feel when this happens? What will happen when this occurs? I'm getting your brain. Our brain works best through questions, not through embedded commands our brain. So it's a little different than that. We don't have to hypnotize you because we're putting you into a physiological state where you're more susceptible to visualizing. The alpha theta state is a state called hypermnesia or supermemory state. So like all behaviors. So we're giving you an opportunity to role play certain. What I like to tell people, like when I work with schools, I tell them Einstein called them thought experiments. So we're actually just guiding you through a series of thought experiments and there's also the dual voice ones, right? Where you're hearing the voice here, and then there's one coming in the right ear, one coming in the left ear. Because how many times have you had to make a decision when you were so stressed out? But they say you should practice like you're going to play. In life, not everything always comes at you, so clearly. So we're training the brain to handle stress and keep this frontal cortex operating, because it's a natural for our brain to shut down under stress, and that's when we need it the most. So we don't want it to shut down. We want it to stay operating and give us choices.
Beautiful. And when I said this thing, I was pointing out to this device. I know for audio people who are listening, you can't see, but I was talking about Dr. Porter's BrainTap device. So let's go there for a moment. There's a piece on this headset that flips down for light. Now, I know from little research I've done listening to you that we want to keep that prefrontal cortex engaged when we're meditating. So are you saying we don't just want to conk out and fall asleep when we're in meditation?
Right. Meditation is not sleeping. That's why when you think of Jesus, when he was praying there in the garden and he said, you have to stay awake, right? He's trying to keep the apostles awake. He was trying to teach them to meditate, but they didn't know what to do. So they're falling asleep. He says, you don't fall asleep. I'd like to tell people it's when your body appears to be asleep, but your mind's awake, because we want to get the mind working with us instead of against us. And this is a time, now at first it's going to be like craziness. You got to make it through. That's why we made BrainTap, because a lot of people can't make it through the monkey mind phase because you've never stopped to listen. There's this, when you talk about self-talk, they say 50,000 words or more a day and 80% are negative. So when you start to meditate, you can start to edit that message, but it's happening below the level of consciousness. So if you don't slow everything down, you never know what you're saying to yourself. There's a saying, I love it. It's, if you talk to other people the way you talk to yourself, you wouldn't have any friends. So we need to become more compassionate about ourselves and give ourselves permission. When we meditate, it's not about not having a thought. It's letting that thought pass through us without taking action on it. Just let it go. It's just a thought. It's not a thing. It's just a thought. Just let it go. And pretty soon what will happen is our brain, by nature, we like things that are positive. We like things that make us feel good. But the avoidance of pain sometimes drives us to do things that we really don't want to do because we don't have a better strategy. So meditation is a way to find your own strategy that's going to work for you personally.
Absolutely. And you have to slow down to be able to see that dialogue that's continuously playing in our minds, called our thoughts, that we identify with all the time. But when there's no gap or no space, we take all of this as who we are. And which leads me to this self-talk thing. Now, so many people, when I've ran groups and just clients that come to me, they have this inner critic, this committee that just bombards them. Now, I know you say science shows that 90% of all self-talk is negative, and this is a huge issue amongst people in the recovery community. Now, you also mentioned that we have to edit or audit our self-talk in order to transform and change. So what do you mean by that, and how does one begin to really edit their self-talk?
Well, you have to do it in real time, right? There's nothing like game time to perform. So in the real world, when you're doing something, there's a few exercises we teach in BrainTap, and you'll probably remember them when I bring them up. But when you find yourself talking negatively, we use a stop sign. You visualize a stop sign, say to yourself, stop giving it energy, stop giving it time. But you have to then immediately say 3 positive things to yourself, because the negative is so ingrained. I tell people it's like running through a field with high grass, and you've already beaten down the path, so it's easy. The new suggestions are like running back through that heavy grass, but if you run through it enough times, you're going to get the new neural pathway, and it's going to be just as easy. And what'll happen is the brain, you have the most powerful computer on earth. It's also the largest pharmacy. It can release 30,000 different neurochemicals. So what we can do is, if we start thinking the right thoughts and training the brain, what happened was, until you were 7, we took in, or I'm just guessing now, it could be 5 for you or 9, it could be any of those ages, but you took in the world, you just absorbed it. Then you started figuring out what's true for you, but you still didn't, the formatting's there. So if you formatted your hard drive to be an Apple computer, you can't put Microsoft software on there. So sometimes that's why we have to have those breakdowns to have a breakthrough. That's like the reformatting. We're reformatting our own bio computer so that we can handle what's new and different in our life. And I think the biggest thing is that we've been told a lot of things that aren't true. And they're really there to protect us, right? Mom and dad, like the old saying that I thought my grandma Armstrong said it. I found out later that actually Queen Elizabeth did. But my dad used to tell us, it's better, don't say anything, because it's better to let them think you're stupid than open your mouth and prove them right. That was one of the messages I had to change in order to be a public speaker, right? That's not going to serve me very well if I'm standing up in front of a group. And that's what I'm thinking. But what my dad was saying was, hey, we got 9 kids. We're going into church. We don't want to make a scene. So they're going to use fear or intimidation, and then our brain starts thinking that's the right way to go when it's not. I mean, there's got to be a balance, obviously, to get people to do things, but so many times the negative wins out. Like if we get hurt with somebody and our brain goes, we get in a relationship, we get hurt, we go, I'm never going to date again because, all women are blah, 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 or all men are blah, blah, blah. Then our brain starts writing a program to prove us right. It's not that it's right or not. It's not, our words create the programs. They now know our words can change up to 2,300 gene expressions, just our words.
That's amazing. So, I wrote that down here. 2,300 gene expressions just by self-talk.
Yep. So what could you change today just by changing to become? I also tell people it's better. I've been accused of being too positive all the time. I had a business partner who said, Porter, you're too damn positive. And I said, well, I'd rather be disappointed occasionally than wake up every morning disappointed. That's the pessimist. The pessimist wakes up every morning, oh, it's a terrible day. I wonder when it's going to rain. I wonder who's going to crap on me or whatever's going on. If you're looking for that, I tell people it's like when you buy a new car. When you drive it off the lot, you start seeing that car everywhere. The same thing's true with your self-talk. Whatever you're saying to yourself, you see it everywhere. It validates for you. So you have to change that, but you don't know that unless you start slowing down the brain, doing these meditations so you can, and also you need positive reinforcement. That's where the BrainTap comes in, or reading positive books. My dad, I was very fortunate. One of the things he did as well that I encouraged and I did with my kids, if they had once they got old enough, they would read books like As a Man Thinketh or The Power of Thinking Big. We had about 7 books that were all positive thinking books that weren't really they weren't super high educational written, but they were 4th grade level and beyond. And my kids read them all through the years because every time they got in trouble, they'd go read a chapter, come back and tell me how are they going to apply that principle in their life. And if they didn't know, we'd sit down and have a discussion about it because I wanted them to become thinkers, not just responders to information. Right now, I think in our world, we have too many people that respond to information as if it's facts. And it's not, it's just information. You've got to everyone has their own ideas, and we need to find our own center, our own focus.
For sure. And you mentioned, we have to be able to, what I take from that is discern, what is truth and not truth. And I heard you on Dave Asprey's Bulletproof Radio talking about, we no longer have to do the exercises like the yogis up in the caves, but we can use technology. One thing I want to say about that is, but how do we cultivate the wisdom? So, this device is beautiful, and we have to be able to develop that wisdom too, which I think in practicing meditation in silence and nature really helps us to cultivate that discernment coupled with the actual technology of what's here. You have anything to say about that?
Yeah, well, I think obviously the wisdom comes with time. Wisdom means wise dome, looking at something from 360 degrees. So when you think about words, they all have double meanings or triple meanings. In this case, what they're talking about is when somebody has wisdom, they're looking at future, past, present. How is it going to affect everyone? What's the best case scenario? That's only going to come with time. The problem we have is that, unfortunately, only less than 10% of the population will start meditating and continue. They find it way too difficult. So how can we move the needle so that they start to feel the physiological benefits? Because we're really kind of bribing them by making them feel good so that they get the mental side that will help them plan their life in a very positive and really on purpose way. Once you start living your life on purpose instead of by default, you get empowered, your self-esteem improves, your self-confidence gets better. You start realizing that you're working with the creative forces of the universe and whoever your higher power is, instead of fighting upstream. So many people are like those salmon that swim upstream and then 2 hours after laying their eggs, they die. In life, how many people we know, they retire and then they expire because they think that life is a big struggle. Life isn't a big struggle. Life is what it is. I mean, we can make it, I always tell my wife when we first got married, she didn't understand me that well, but I said, there's 2 ways to enlightenment, Cynthia. You can laugh your way or you can cry your way. You get to choose. So I would prefer to laugh. have some fun and do it. I've already cried enough. There's enough to cry about. But if we need to have fun, opening up our minds and having a good time, knowing that life is meant to enjoy. The problem, I think, is that there has to be that balance between competition and cooperation. Too many people drive toward competition, even within themselves. Maybe they're having a problem with the addiction because they have a brother or sister that's successful and they're not, so they don't think they measure up. When Buddha said all unhappiness stems from unfavorable comparisons, that's the problem most people have.
Oh,
So when you
quote.
think about that, and then one of the other things I usually tell people is, because they get angry at people, right? And I always tell them, don't give away your remote control to another person. When he also said, when he or she angers you, they conquer you. And I did martial arts with my son, and I said, and he got all mad because he was sparring with somebody, and I said, that person's so off balance, they're so angry and upset, just do this, this, and this. And he goes, wow, when you stay calm, you have control over people that are angry. Instead of these angry people are out of control. They don't know what they're doing. They're in that beta brain, they're up there. But when you get into that, kind of like the Shaolin priest that you see on TV, Kung Fu, and, they think things through. Life slows down when you're like that, and life's happening so fast that if you get caught up in that spin wheel, then you have to do these, unfortunately, these other ways to disrupt your nervous system, which are not healthy, like doing drugs or doing alcohol to excess.
Yeah, you mentioned a good point, living on purpose. And that's when we can shift from that victim to victor, and realize that everything is happening for us, not to us. And it is quite the journey. And as we wind down here, Dr. Porter, where can people learn about your work, your books, and specifically this BrainTap device?
Yeah. So first thing, I think if they're interested in learning anything, just go to braintap.info, and they can get a free copy of my book, Thrive in Overdrive. And they can also get 15 days free on the app. So best way to do it is just try it out for yourself. Once you're in that system, you'll see all the information about everything. And then, of course, follow me on social media. Just put in hashtag Dr. Patrick Porter or hashtag BrainTap, and you'll see us. And for those that can't afford it, every Wednesday night at 7 p.m., I do a live meditation on Instagram, where I just take one of the different things, and we do it kind of in general for the well-being of the planet. We're just kind of sharing our energy and just creating peace and tranquility. I take a different aspect of BrainTap, and I talk about it every Wednesday night.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. And I do a BrainTap at least once a day. I'm seeing results. It's helping me with sleep. It's helping me with focus. So I really, really appreciate you. I appreciate the work that you're bringing into the world. And I really appreciate your dad's struggle, because if it wasn't for your dad's struggle, you wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be here talking about this and helping millions of people. So thanks for taking the time today, Dr. Porter. It was an amazing conversation.
Well, thank you for having me, Mike. And I hope that someone out there is ready to better their brains, because we have a mission to better 1 billion brains, and we want it to be yours. So
and if I'm here to help you achieve that mission.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.